I always believed that love meant trust, loyalty, and growing together through the storms life throws at you. That's what I signed up for when I married Ethan 7 years ago. We weren't perfect, of course, no couple ever is, but I thought we were solid. We had built a life together, a small house in the suburbs, 2 dogs, a shared dream of starting a family someday. He had his own marketing firm, and I was working in finance, climbing my way up through sheer effort and long nights. I thought he was proud of me, the way I supported him when he launched his business. How I never once complained when I took on the majority of the bills for the first year he didn't make much. I thought we had mutual respect. But all of that came crashing down one Tuesday evening, in the quiet of our home, when I accidentally saw an email notification on his tablet. It was from a lawyer, with the subject line, "Initial Draft, Divorce Filing." I remember the way my stomach dropped. My hands trembled as I tapped into the email, reading line by line what he'd been planning for weeks, maybe even months, without breathing a word to me. Not a fight, not a sign of discontent. Just a betrayal in clean, professional language. What shocked me even more wasn't just that he was filing for divorce, but the way he was preparing to take everything. According to the attached draft, he was trying to argue that since I had a higher salary, he was entitled to spousal support, half the house, and even a portion of my retirement account. He'd claimed in the document that his business had never taken off, something I knew wasn't true, and that he'd become financially dependent on me. It was like reading the words of a stranger wearing my husband's face. The man who used to hold me close at night was now trying to destroy my financial future behind my back. For about 5 minutes, I just sat there, completely numb, staring at the glowing screen. My mind reeled with confusion, hurt, and most of all rage. I replayed every recent conversation, every suspicious glance, every time he'd casually asked about my accounts or my bonus schedule. It all started to make sense. He wasn't just blindsiding me emotionally. He was setting me up to lose. He wanted to leave me not just alone but financially devastated, and he had done it so smugly, so quietly, with the assumption that I wouldn't catch on until it was too late. But he had underestimated me. In finance, I'd been trained to assess risk, to prepare for worst-case scenarios, and to act strategically. So, instead of confronting him right away, like I wanted to, yelling, crying, demanding answers, I made a different choice. I took a deep breath, locked his tablet screen, and began formulating a plan. The first thing I did was contact my firm's in-house legal advisor, not to discuss divorce, but to understand asset protection. Quietly, carefully, I began gathering documentation, my income history, property ownership deeds, retirement account statements, and even old emails where Ethan acknowledged that I had been the sole provider for large portions of our marriage. Over the next few days, I moved with silent precision. I opened a separate bank account in my name at a different institution. I redirected my paycheck to that account. I froze our joint credit cards to prevent any further charges without my approval. I checked property records and verified the home was still listed under both our names. I had paid for 70% of it, and I had the documentation to prove it. Next, I took inventory of all shared assets and debts down to the last dollar. Ethan had no idea what I was doing. He'd kiss me goodbye each morning, head off to his office, or so I thought, and I'd stay back and build my defense. I even scheduled a consultation with a top-tier family attorney, someone I found through a colleague who had gone through a messy divorce of her own. This attorney was a shark in stilettos, and after I showed her the draft Ethan had received, her jaw tensed. She explained that what he was trying to do wasn't just underhanded, was manipulative, and she had seen it before. We crafted a legal strategy together, one that would not just protect my assets, but completely dismantle any argument Ethan tried to make about being dependent on me. She advised I remained quiet for at least another week, while we filed for our own protection and prepared for a possible countersuit. It was the hardest thing I've ever done to sleep beside someone I knew was plotting against me. But I reminded myself that this was temporary. 1 week of pretending to be ignorant in exchange for long-term freedom and justice. During that week, I discovered even more. A friend who worked in city records helped me confirm that Ethan had filed for a separate LLC under a different name, meaning his business was, in fact, thriving, and he was hiding the money. I also found hotel charges on the joint credit card. That didn't line up with his supposed client meetings. All signs pointed to the fact that this man wasn't just divorcing me, he had a whole life I didn't know about, and yet, each night, he came home, smiled, and acted like we were fine. It was both nauseating and eye-opening. 1 week later, to the day, I served him. He came home to a quiet house. I had timed everything perfectly. The dogs were with my sister, my important files were locked away, and I was waiting for him at the kitchen counter with a manila envelope. His expression turned from confusion to horror the moment he read the contents. You're filing," he stammered, his voice catching in his throat. "You were going to divorce me first," I said calmly. "You just didn't realize I'd figure it out." What followed was a flurry of angry words, denial, and finally, desperation. He claimed he was just exploring options, that the draft meant nothing, that he was never going to go through with it. But the evidence I had collected proved otherwise. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply informed him that my lawyer had already filed the paperwork and that temporary financial orders were in place. He was not to touch our joint accounts, not to sell any assets, and that the court had already been made aware of his false claims. The best part: my attorney had filed a motion to investigate his hidden LLC and subpoenaed his financial records. The look on his face when he realized I had beat him at his own game was one I will never forget. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about protecting myself, standing up for my future, and proving that I was not some naive woman who would roll over and let him destroy me. Over the next few weeks, the legal proceedings revealed even more of Ethan's deceit. He had stashed over $100,000 in a hidden business account, funneled through shell companies and labeled as expenses. He had lied about his income for over a year, claiming losses while secretly earning steady profit. He had also been in contact with another woman, someone he had labeled a business associate in his messages, but who, according to emails and travel itineraries, had accompanied him on multiple conferences. The betrayal was deep, but I refused to let it break me. I leaned on my support system, my attorney, my therapist, and even my colleagues at work, who admired how I handled everything with strength and grace. I wasn't just fighting a legal battle, I was reclaiming my dignity. Ethan tried to play the victim in court. Of course, he cried, claimed he had been misunderstood, that I had blindsided him, but the evidence spoke louder than any of his words. My attorney laid everything bare, from the hidden assets to the fabricated dependency claims. The judge wasn't impressed with his performance. When the final ruling came, it was clear: I would retain full ownership of my retirement account, the house, and all financial assets that were solely in my name. Ethan, on the other hand, was ordered to pay court fees and undergo a financial audit. The divorce was finalized 2 months later, and as I signed the last of the papers, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. In the aftermath, I didn't rush into anything. No rebound relationships, no dramatic life changes. I just started really living for myself. I redecorated the house, turned the guest room into a studio for painting, something I'd always wanted to explore. I took solo trips, spent time with friends I had neglected, and even hosted financial literacy workshops for women who had been in similar situations. It was healing, empowering, and deeply satisfying. Ethan's downfall continued in quiet waves. The audit revealed even more discrepancies in his taxes, and he eventually had to sell his business to cover debts. I didn't gloat, but I won't lie, felt vindicated. Not because I wanted to see him suffer, but because justice had prevailed. One of the most surprising things was how many women reached out to me once they heard parts of my story, women who had gone through similar betrayals but hadn't known how to protect themselves. That's when I decided to write about my experience. Not to expose Ethan, but to educate others. My story became a voice for the silent, a warning for the trusting, and a rallying cry for financial independence. I titled it the same as this: He thought I'd be helpless after the divorce, but I moved first. Because that's exactly what happened. I moved first, and it saved me. Months passed, and with every day that went by, I grew more confident in the decisions I had made. I began speaking at women's events and financial planning seminars. Not as a victim of betrayal, but as a strategist who had turned a potential disaster into a personal revolution. I wasn't ashamed of what I'd been through, I was proud. Proud that I hadn't let someone else's plans destroy my stability. Proud that I had acted with intelligence instead of emotion, and proud that I could now help others do the same. I even started a blog, sharing resources, advice, and my personal journey. It gained traction surprisingly fast. One post in particular where I broke down how to detect financial red flags in a marriage went viral. The comments poured in, filled with stories from women who had been lied to, stolen from, abandoned, or manipulated financially. It broke my heart, but it also strengthened my resolve. I realized that women everywhere needed tools and knowledge, not just comfort. That's when I partnered with a nonprofit organization that helps women transition out of abusive or financially controlling relationships. We developed a course, ran online webinars, and even held private consultations for those who didn't know where to begin. Every time I saw someone's face light up with the understanding that they could take back control, that they weren't as helpless as they'd been made to feel, I felt that familiar spark of purpose. It wasn't just about my divorce anymore. It was about legacy, impact, and creating a community where no woman ever feels as blindsided as I did that Tuesday night when I saw that email. Ethan became a cautionary tale, a symbol of what manipulation looks like behind a charming smile. And I became a survivor who thrived. Years later, when someone brings up Ethan, I don't flinch. I don't feel anger. I don't even feel sadness. I feel clarity. He taught me one of the most valuable lessons of my life, the importance of foresight, of knowing your worth, and of never assuming that someone else will protect your interests better than you can. I no longer define success by being partnered or praised. I define it by the peace I feel when I wake up in my own bed, in my own home, paid for by my own hands, with no one scheming behind my back. I've rebuilt my life, not from the ashes, but from strategy. My story has inspired thousands of women to take control of their own finances, to ask hard questions in relationships, and to trust their instincts when something feels off. What Ethan tried to do was destroy me in secret, thinking I'd be too stunned to react. But he didn't realize that I had spent years building more than just a bank account, had built resilience, wisdom, and an inner strength he never saw coming. He thought I'd be helpless, but I moved first. And in doing so, I reclaimed everything that mattered: my freedom, my stability, and my voice. And that, more than any revenge, is the real victory.